There was a moment you stayed quiet. Someone spoke over you, dismissed you, laughed when you were serious, and you let it go. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you didn't want to look emotional. You told yourself it wasn't worth it. You convinced yourself that silence was strength. But here's the truth. Every time you say nothing after being disrespected, you teach them something. Not about kindness, about access. You're not being mature. You're being erased. And if you keep doing it, they won't stop. They'll learn that your peace is negotiable. Today, that ends. Today, you will learn how to command respect without ever raising your voice. Disrespect rarely arrives in full volume. It begins in fragments, a subtle tone, a dismissive laugh, a delay in response that feels intentional, a joke that feels like a warning, and you feel it. Not always in your mind, but in your body. The pause in your breath, the drop in your chest. That moment is not trivial. It is information. It is your internal wisdom alerting you that something just crossed a line. And still, you say nothing. You tell yourself to be mature, to pick your battles. You tell yourself that maybe they did not mean it, that silence is the higher ground. And while silence can be powerful, silence can also be permission. The difference is intention. When you stay silent to stay grounded, you are in control. But when you stay silent to stay liked, you are in danger. Because every time you say nothing, you teach them that they can say it again. Do it again, push again, and nothing will happen. You become the person who absorbs, the one who always gives the benefit of the doubt, the one who stays calm while being cut down. And at first, people might admire you for it. They will say you are easy to be around. They will call you strong. But over time, they will stop noticing you entirely. Because when someone never pushes back, they become invisible. And when disrespect is never met with clarity, it becomes culture. Not just in relationships, in families, in workplaces, in friendships. Silence is not neutral. It is active. It shapes how people behave around you. And more importantly, it shapes what you believe you deserve. So, the question is not whether they will try to cross your line. The question is whether you have one, whether you will name it, whether you will stand in it, not with anger, but with certainty. That kind of clarity changes everything. It teaches people that while you are kind, you are not passive, that while you are patient, you are not to be tested, that while you are calm, your silence is not a door left open. It is a choice. And when that choice is violated, you will respond. Maybe with words, maybe with space, but with something. Because doing nothing is no longer an option. You do not need to yell, you do not need to lecture, you just need to be willing to act, to leave the room, to pause the conversation, to stop explaining your right to be respected. That is what makes people adjust. Not your pain, your presence, not your reaction, your decision. So ask yourself now, is there a moment you stayed silent when you knew it was not okay? What did that silence cost you? What did it teach them? And more importantly, what did it teach you about your own worth? If this reminded you of a moment you regret staying silent, comment below with "No more silence." Let it be your turning point, not for them, for you. Because the next time it happens, you will not freeze. You will not shrink. You will remember this moment, and you will choose clarity over comfort. Respect is not a gift. It is a reflection, a mirror held up to how you carry yourself, how you respond, and most importantly, what you tolerate. People do not walk into your life knowing how to treat you. They learn. They learn from your boundaries. They learn from your silences. They learn from your patterns. And most of all, they learn from your energy. When someone meets you, they may come with assumptions, but it is your presence that rewrites those assumptions into reality. You cannot train someone to respect you by hoping they see your worth. You train them by showing them how you see yourself. Most people do not set out to disrespect you. They test, they observe, they push, sometimes without even knowing it. And your response in those early moments becomes their roadmap. If you allow the joke that hurts, they will joke again. If you excuse the tone that cuts, they will speak to you like that again. Not because they are evil, but because they are human. And human beings adapt to what is allowed. Respect is not about demanding better. It is about demonstrating that better is the only option. Training people how to treat you is not about teaching them a lesson. It is about setting a tone. That tone is established not with long explanations, but with consistent action. You do not need to explain why you deserve respect. You just need to embody it in how you carry your no, in how you pause before responding, in how you step back when something feels off. And when someone notices that your energy shifts when they cross the line, they begin to understand. This is not someone who plays small to keep peace. This is someone who leads with quiet clarity. Sometimes, you think being low maintenance will make people love you more. That being easygoing, flexible, understanding will invite more care. But what it often invites is entitlement. Because when people learn that they can do less and still have full access to you, they do not adjust upward, they adjust downward. They stop trying, they stop being thoughtful, not because they do not care, but because you taught them that your effort is constant, even when theirs is inconsistent. And over time, that dynamic trains you to overfunction and trains them to underdeliver. That is not respect, that is imbalance. So the training starts with you. Not with rules you give to others, but with standards you live by yourself. You show people what you value by what you allow into your space. You teach people what matters by what you protect. You define how serious you are by how consistently you act. It is not about being perfect. It is about being honest, about being steady, about being willing to disappoint someone else before you betray yourself. You will not need to raise your voice when your presence is clear. You will not need to correct someone twice when your first no is felt. You will not need to chase respect when it already lives in how you move. That is what training looks like. Not control, not dominance, just clarity. Quiet, grounded, visible clarity. And if this message helped you see where you might be teaching people the wrong lesson about your value, take a moment to reset the standard. Not tomorrow, now. Drop a comment and write, "I set the tone." Not for views, but as a quiet decision. Because respect is not given, it is trained. And from this moment on, you're the one doing the training. There is a moment when the conversation turns. The tone shifts, the energy drops. You know something isn't right. Maybe they crossed a line. Maybe they mocked your boundary. Maybe they spoke in a way that quietly chipped at your dignity. And in that moment, you feel it. That familiar tension. The debate within yourself. Should I say something? Should I let it go? Should I explain how it made me feel? But what if, this time, you simply disengaged? Not from anger, not from fear, but from alignment. You do not need to justify stepping away from a moment that no longer honors who you are. You do not owe everyone access to your presence. And you certainly do not need to feel guilty for choosing peace over performance. Disengaging is not weakness. It is intelligence. It is knowing when a dynamic no longer serves you. It is recognizing when continuing the conversation will cost you more than it will solve. It is the decision to stop pouring energy into spaces that no longer echo respect. That is not quitting. That is clarity. And clarity is not something you ever need to apologize for. Many of us have been conditioned to over-explain, to defend every exit, to soothe every discomfort our silence might create. But the truth is, when you begin honoring your boundaries, some people will feel offended simply because they were never expected to adjust. Their discomfort is not your guilt to carry. Their confusion is not your job to solve. Your only task is to stay grounded in what you know is true. There is power in leaving a conversation unfinished. There is power in walking away without burning the room down. There is power in not responding when you are baited into defending your worth. Because your worth does not live in someone else's understanding. It lives in how calmly you reclaim your space. You do not need to slam the door. You just need to stop walking through it. You do not need a grand speech. You just need one clear decision: to disengage with grace, to protect your peace without asking for permission, to stand up not with volume, but with quiet removal. If someone cannot meet you at the level of basic respect, you do not need to argue. You do not need to prove. You do not need to teach. You simply need to leave. Sometimes the most powerful message is not what you say. It is what you no longer participate in. There comes a point in your life when you realize that explaining your worth is the surest sign you have forgotten it, not because you are weak, but because the need to be understood can become louder than the truth you already carry. You want them to get it. You want them to see that you meant well, that your heart was in the right place, that you were never trying to be difficult. But the more you explain, the more you begin to shape yourself around someone else's expectations. And that's where the erosion begins. You are no longer standing in your value. You are performing it, justifying it, selling it in pieces to someone who never asked for it in the first place. The truth is, people who see your worth do not need an explanation. They feel it in how you show up. They sense it in how you carry your boundaries without turning them into walls. They respect it because it is consistent, because it is not reactive, because it does not beg. The people who need your backstory, your disclaimers, your emotional footnotes, they are not listening to understand. They are listening to defend their version of you. And every time you try to convince them otherwise, you move further away from the ground you are meant to stand on. You do not owe anyone a full breakdown of your standards. You do not have to explain why you said no, why you walked away, why something no longer works for you. Your clarity is not a debate. It is a direction. It is not rude. It is not cold. It is simply the way you honor your own peace without waiting for someone else to validate it. And yes, at first, it will feel uncomfortable, especially if you are raised to smooth everything over, to make everyone feel okay, to avoid being the one who makes things difficult. But holding your worth is not difficult. It is honest. And honesty is only uncomfortable for those who benefit from your silence. Every time you explain your worth to someone who will not hold it, you chip away at your own sense of knowing. You turn what should be self-trust into self-doubt. You rehearse the same conversation, hoping the outcome will shift. But worth is not proven in repetition. It is revealed in stillness, in walking away, in choosing not to participate in dynamics that require you to constantly prove you deserve basic respect. There is a quiet strength in not explaining, in letting your actions speak, in letting your boundaries hold, in letting someone misunderstand you rather than distort yourself to be understood. That kind of peace does not come from others. It comes from finally deciding that your truth is enough, even when no one agrees. That your value does not rise or fall with someone else's ability to recognize it. And that you are done performing clarity for people who are not ready to receive it. You are not hard to love. You are just no longer willing to shrink for approval. And that is not something you need to explain. That is something you simply live. You do not need to announce your exit. You do not need to explain the quiet decision you made after too many moments that did not feel right. You do not need to send one last message that outlines everything they missed. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply leave. Leave the conversation. Leave the dynamic. Leave the version of yourself that kept waiting to be seen, and let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence you used to fill. Let them feel the absence of your presence. Because if they never truly valued what you brought, they will only understand when it is no longer available. There is dignity in quiet exits, not the kind rooted in resentment, but the kind born from clarity. You do not leave to punish, you leave to protect. And the ones who never saw your worth will call you cold. They will say you changed. They will tell a story where you became distant, less kind, harder to reach. Let them, because that version is easier to accept than the truth that you waited, that you extended grace, that you gave more chances than you should have, that your leaving was not sudden. It was the last honest thing you had left to offer. People will project their confusion onto your silence. They will invent reasons. They will try to make sense of your calm. Let them, because your silence is not for them. It is for you. It is the space where you gather your energy back. The space where you no longer have to defend your decision. The space where you begin again. Not out of anger, but out of respect for the part of you that finally said enough. There is strength in not clarifying, in not chasing closure from people who never offered clarity when it mattered, in not forcing anyone to acknowledge your absence. Because when your presence has been consistent, your absence is loud. And if they never heard you while you were speaking, let the silence be your final truth. Not to hurt them, but to free yourself. The world tells you to be kind, to be forgiving, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But kindness does not require you to stay. Forgiveness does not mean continued access. And giving someone the benefit of the doubt does not mean giving them your peace. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away without the need to explain why it took so long. Let them wonder, not because you are playing games, but because you are done giving words to people who ignored your presence. Because your decision to leave is not a request for attention. It is a reclaiming of space, a quiet declaration that your time, your energy, your softness is no longer available for misuse. And over time, you will realize something. The people who are meant to stay will never need you to perform pain for them to understand it. They will not require explanations to respect your boundaries. They will not turn your silence into distance. They will recognize your leaving as what it is, a moment of truth, a final act of self-respect. And in that space, you begin again, not bitter, not broken, but whole. Self-respect is not loud. It does not demand attention. It does not need applause. It does not explain itself in long paragraphs or show up in emotional outbursts. It moves quietly. It chooses carefully. It speaks less, but listens deeper. And it is always watching how you treat yourself when no one else is watching. That is where it lives. In your choices, in your pauses, in your boundaries. In the small, almost invisible decisions you make when faced with disrespect. Do I let this slide? Do I call this out? Do I stay one more time? Do I keep proving something that should already be understood? Those are not trivial questions. They are moments of definition. Because every time you choose to act from self-respect, even in the smallest way, you reshape what your life is built on. Self-respect is not something you wear. It is something you practice. It shows up in how you let people speak to you, in how you protect your time, in how you end conversations that no longer feel honest. It shows up in how you rest without guilt, in how you say no without a speech, in how you walk away without needing the final word. Because when your standard is clear, your peace is steady. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop inviting people to vote on your value. You stop searching for external confirmation that your truth is valid. And the most powerful part of self-respect is this. It does not seek revenge. It does not hope they hurt the way you did. It does not use silence as punishment. It uses silence as protection, as space, as a return to clarity. Because self-respect knows that preserving your dignity is more important than proving your point. That holding your ground matters more than being liked. That alignment will always feel quieter than chaos, but far more honest. The world will not always reward your self-respect. In fact, some people will resent it. They will call you cold, too proud, too distant. But what they really mean is this. You stopped being available for their comfort. You stopped bending so they wouldn't break. You stopped explaining, chasing, tolerating. You stopped performing the version of yourself that was easier to use. And that shift is not rejection. It is rebirth. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming someone true. And as you live from that place, something changes. The conversations get shorter. The relationships get clearer. The energy in the room tells you everything you need to know. Because self-respect sharpens your awareness. It makes you more honest, not more harsh. It softens your anger because it replaces it with standards. It silences your need to convince because it replaces it with calm. So from this moment forward, let your self-respect be the quiet standard that shapes your life. Let it speak for you when you feel unseen. Let it walk out of rooms that no longer feel safe. Let it choose peace without explanation. Because you are not here to beg for basic kindness. You are here to live in a way that teaches the world what not to do when they are in your presence. There is a fear that lingers quietly beneath every boundary. If I say this, they might leave. If I pull back, they might let go. If I stop explaining, they might stop caring. So you stay silent a little longer. You bend a little further. You give one more chance. Not because you don't see the truth, but because a part of you still believes that holding on is safer than being alone. But here is what you eventually learn. You don't lose people when you respect yourself. You lose the illusion of who they were. You lose the story you wrote about their potential. You lose the hope that if you stayed small enough, soft enough, silent enough, they might finally choose you the way you quietly chose them. But real connection does not require self-erasure. And real respect does not require you to keep proving you're worth it. When you begin to honor yourself, some relationships will fall away. Not because you became someone new, but because you returned to someone real. And the version of you that tolerated everything to keep them close no longer exists. That version survived. This one lives. This one pauses when something feels off. This one speaks when silence would be safer. This one leaves when peace is no longer possible. And this one does not explain the exit. Not out of pride, out of self-trust. You are not difficult because your standards rose. You are not distant because your tolerance dropped. You are simply no longer interested in dynamics that require your silence to survive. And yes, that means some people will stop reaching out. Some conversations will fade. Some doors will quietly close. Let them. You are not losing anything real. You are watching illusions dissolve. What remains is truth. And truth may be smaller, but it is cleaner. It may be quieter, but it is stronger. Respecting yourself does not mean being alone. It means making room for what aligns. It means clearing the noise so you can hear the right signal. It means creating space for people who do not need to be taught how to treat you. They already know, because they have done the work too. And when they arrive, they do not test your boundaries. They recognize them. They do not question your no. They honor it. They do not require performance. They require presence. And your presence, finally, will feel safe again. So if someone pulls away when you rise into your standard, let them. If someone stops calling when you stop shrinking, let them. If someone grows quiet when you stop over-explaining, let them. You are not hard to love. You are just no longer easy to use. And that difference changes everything. You do not need to fear the distance that comes when you choose self-respect. You need to fear the closeness that costs your clarity, because nothing real will leave when you decide to honor yourself. And anything that does was only ever real in your imagination. What you lose is not connection. What you lose is the belief that your silence was the price of belonging. And in its place, you find something much more honest. Your center, your voice, your peace, and the kind of love that never asks you to let go of yourself to feel worthy again. You do not need to raise your voice to be heard. You do not need to fight to be respected. You simply need to stop disappearing inside your own life. Because every time you choose silence over truth, tolerance over clarity, comfort over boundaries, you are slowly stepping away from yourself. And one day, you wake up surrounded by people who have learned to love your absence more than your presence. That is when you return. Not to prove anything, not to demand attention, but to rebuild a life where your voice is not optional, where your peace is not sacrificed, where your self-respect is not negotiable. You don't have to explain. You don't have to announce. You just have to live in a way that makes it clear you know who you are and what you will no longer accept. That kind of life will never chase validation. It will attract truth. And that truth is the only thing worth building everything else on.